Get fire adapted. Learn what you can do now to reduce wildfire damage later at fireadapted.org. A public service message brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council. Learn more at fireadapted.org.
710 KURV is operated by our Communications Group. The following viewpoints do not necessarily represent those of our Communications, its staff, or management.
.710 KURV Talkback. Dr. Lawrence Gelman, home of the Iron Microphone, streaming live on KURV.com. My website, talkbackonline.com. 1-800-580-8255. 1-800-580-TALK. We're here again Saturday morning, and see what we can learn and teach. That is what this program is about, is learning and teaching. Ignorance is widespread and very deep breadth and depth, and it's an abyss of ignorance. I was the other day speaking to one of the phony baloney media people, his name Bohannon or something, and these guys, they all think they're so smart, but they really don't know much of anything at all. And of course, when you're arrogant like he is, then there's no way you can be taught, because you know everything already. And we had a discussion as to the personal income tax, and I said it was unconstitutional, and he said it's not unconstitutional because it was passed through an amendment process. Like that, all of a sudden, just because an amendment is passed, ratified, that somehow makes it legitimate and constitutional. What kind of silliness is that? The constitutions and amendments and laws are made by man. They're not made by nature, and they're not made by God. And therefore, they can be done and undone by man. Constitution was created. It has specific stipulations, but once again, it was made by man. So if it could be made by man, it could be unmade or undone by man. That doesn't make it legitimate. That doesn't make, just because there's an amendment process and it is followed and ratified according to certain guidelines, that doesn't make it legitimate. Now, the Constitution bestows a taxing power, and this is what it says in Article 1 of Section 8. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. The Constitution allows a direct tax. Article 1, Section 2 says, direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states. A direct tax is a tax that's applied directly on everybody, unlike the indirect tax, which is like a sales tax. You buy something and there's a sales tax on it, and you're paying a tax indirectly. So direct tax is applied directly to something, to an individual or to a state. Now, the Constitution does not allow a direct tax to be placed on individuals, and only upon states. Article 1, Section 9 says, no capitation or other direct tax shall be laid unless in proportion to the census or enumeration taken. And so we have a direct tax. A direct tax can only be applied to the states, because that's what it says in the Constitution. Article 1, Section 2, direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states. But only a direct tax only applied to states and no one else, because What's allowed is direct tax shall be apportioned among the several states. There is no provision which allows a direct tax on individuals. And because it doesn't say so, it cannot be done. The federal direct tax can only be assessed to states and not individuals or any other private entity. The government, besides taxation, obtains so-called revenues through the unconstitutionally created Federal Reserve Bank, which, as we have learned, has no qualms whatsoever in printing up as many dollars as the government desires in order to fulfill its endless craving for cash. Now, since the government has numerous avenues to confiscate the wherewithal of producers and workers, as well as having the authority to apply a direct tax to the states, and also has the means to print currency without any apparent limit, the question then arises as to the reason the federal government opted to subvert the Constitution and apply a direct tax upon individuals and corporations. The purpose had less to do with revenue than with the suppression of independence. From economic independence develops political independence, thus presenting a potential threat to the authority of government. It is the government's fear and loathing of independence in any form that motivates the government's actions and reactions. The Founding Fathers realized that economic independence was absolutely essential in maintaining a free society. However, world economies followed the model of centralized control, where they could be managed by a central authority. Economics are micromanaged from the centralized authority by a bureaucracy populated by those without expertise, who are easily influenced by political considerations and are corruptible. Now, who is better to decide what will best satisfy the consumer? The consumer, his or herself, or a bureaucrat living hundreds of miles away? As the government gains greater and greater control over the means of production, the desires of the consumer are replaced by what best suits the central authority. The more vested the central authority becomes in an enterprise, the more it impedes competition. The more protected by government is an enterprise, the less it feels a need to meet changing market conditions. Inefficient, poorly performing, or outmoded manufacturing is protected and subsidized due to undue political influence. Meanwhile, the innovative enterprises that could potentially compete with the politically favored are strangled by a costly... What's that? Oh, that's me. Huh. Stop that noise. Where was I? Somebody's calling. I'll take that call later, I guess. Okay. The more protected by government is an enterprise, the less it feels a need to meet changing market conditions. Inefficient, poorly performing, or outmoded manufacturing is protected and subsidized, make the same mistake twice, due to undue political influence. Meanwhile, the innovative enterprises that could potentially compete with the politically favored are strangled by costly and time-consuming regulations created specifically to stifle competition. Government monopolizes some production and services or subcontracts out to the politically favored. Merit is replaced by a political cronyism that dictates which companies and entities are to receive government's favor. This micromanagement inevitably yields a pervasive fiscal stagnation, lack of products, and a generalized want, fashioning a social environment marked by a population mired in poverty and misery, functioning as slaves and serfs. Though bad for the people, it was good for the thieving aristocrats, warlords, dictators, and others in the central government living in luxury at the expense of the general population. Thus debilitated economically, the general population had few resources and little in the way of recourse to ameliorate their lowly status. This wretchedness suited the autocrats very well because it reduced or eliminated any source of threat to the ruling hierarchy. This social environment was sustained from generation to generation through government-mediated bribery, indoctrination, intimidation, and force. The Revolutionary War, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution were the means to alter this course and liberate the people from the shackles of government and its attendant bureaucratic quicksand. As important as the attainment of individual liberty was in justifying the Revolutionary War, so too was the attainment of individual economic independence. Individual liberty cannot exist without economic liberty. In the United States, this economic liberty produced rapid growth of industry with many innovations and inventions, creating an entire new class of first-generation wealthy entrepreneurs. This free market system did not please the autocrats that dominate every government in the world, and the United States is no exception. The parasitic members of the self-anointed elite fare very well in such a system. As a consequence of their having developed an inbred indolence over time, the parasitic traditional elite were incapable of competing and witnessed an inevitable erosion of their power at the hands of the detested nouveau riche. The government had developed a comfortable mutualistic relationship with the undeserving. The good old boy system based on nepotism, inbreeding, and relationship was threatened. Government power dependent to a significant degree on this network of old-school acquaintances was consequently imperiled. In reaction, the federal government sought to bring the commoners in private enterprise to heel. It was an assault on the free market system and the resultant independence engendered by a capitalist system and not tax revenue that motivated the forces of autocratic rule to formulate countermeasures that led to the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, the Corporate Excise Tax of 1909, which implemented a tax on corporations, the Clayton Act of 1914, extending the Sherman Antitrust Act, and the creation of the personal income tax through the 16th Amendment in 1913. Every one of these government actions was designed to bring private enterprise under federal control. The Constitution had been crafted specifically to prevent such authority over private enterprise from being assumed by the central government. The founders' understanding was that the individual human rights to life, liberty, and property, and the right to the means of their defense are natural and incorporated into each individual at the moment of birth, conception. As each individual takes possession of these rights by birthright, they are thus delineated by the Constitution and guaranteed in perpetuity through the 9th and 10th Amendments that deny any implied powers conferred upon the government. The existence of and the adherence to a legislative process do not necessarily confer legitimacy to the legislation passed. The existence and adherence to an amendment creating process do not necessarily confer legitimacy to an amendment ratified. No act subsequent to the formation of the Constitution, whether it be an amendment ratified, legislation passed, or popular vote taken, can legitimately affect that bequeathal of rights. No generation can reduce the rights of a future generation legitimately. The enactment of such means of taxation and other forms of centralized usurpation of control over private enterprise confers neither legitimacy nor constitutionality and runs directly counter to the original intent of the Founding Fathers and is illegal under United States law. The power balance was never meant to shift from the people to the government, and this precept is the very basis of the Constitution. Every one of the aforementioned acts of legislation and the 16th Amendment shifts the balance of power from the people to the government and is thus unconstitutional. This axiom holds for every piece of legislation or amendment that shifts the balance of power from the people to the government. They are unconstitutional. Man makes laws, which can say anything. That does not mean that laws passed through an accepted legislative process are legitimate or legal. In the feudal systems of governance that existed for hundreds of years, the king asserted uncontested autocratic rule through a widely established system of the divine right of kings. Laws were enacted autocratically and arbitrarily according to the whim of the king. Though perverted, this system of governance was nevertheless considered legitimate. Rule by the divine right had gained the acceptance of the general population through a process of indoctrination, favors granted, intimidation, and force. It should not be surprising, then, that less overtly oligarchic, though equally as corrupt systems, such as democracies, republics, and a democratic republic such as exists in the United States, should also be considered legitimate. Chicanery and manipulation of legislation and amendments to suit the ends of government is common throughout the world. Legislative bodies, even elected ones, are as corrupt and self-serving as explicit dictatorships and aristocracies. They merely apply different means to achieve their nefarious goals. The approbation of these governmental acts by the useful dupes in education, the media, the system of jurisprudence, in general, the general society, and the government does not negate an intrinsic unconstitutionality and illegality of these government actions. Just because someone says it, or all the world says it, doesn't necessarily make it so. Laws are created by man. Natural laws are created by a power above man. Gravity is a natural law. Other natural laws are the right to life and everything that's contingent upon that. So life as a natural law, as gravity is a natural law, is beyond the arbitrary whim of man or man's government. Our founding fathers understood that. They understood that natural law dictates that a human being is born free and independent, and therefore anything that subverts natural law. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution merely expressed what natural law is. They did not create the law. The right to life, liberty, and happiness are natural laws and therefore beyond the control of government. Now, government, well, I guess that's not beyond the control of government. They are natural laws. Now, the government can try to suppress or eliminate or destroy a natural law that by controlling man. But that doesn't mean that just because the government can do it doesn't make it legitimate. The natural laws are part of the property of each individual man. They cannot be given away by one generation, taken from a future generation. That they cannot do. What the Founding Fathers did was create a system which they believed, rightfully, was a just system in which the government, rather than functioning for its own needs, functioned to guarantee the rights of the people. That is the purpose of government, and how many governments fulfill that purpose. That is why most governments are illegitimate, and that is why most governments eventually fall, because they are not legitimate and unsustainable. Individual rights are as natural as gravity or as any other natural law. All the Declaration of Independence and Constitution did was to agree with that and set up a system which maintained those principles. The United States' success, economically and otherwise, due to that implementation of natural law, has brought on the ire of all other governments and autocrats and oligarchs who felt themselves innately empowered to control the lives of other people and did not appreciate this new source of independence in which even the most common of individuals could ascend to great heights. That threatened the very foundation of the aristocratic philosophy that power and authority was a function of birth and not of merit, that you were born to be king and you were born to be a peasant. That is what they believed. And this new system allowed the former peasants to become as wealthy and powerful as any aristocrat. Because the aristocrats were, for the most part, indolent and incompetent, they could not survive in such a system based upon free market and free market exchange of currency and ideas. Therefore, it was those who are in government, most of whom are elitist autocrats, sought to undo what the Constitution had done in order to achieve a return to the previous system of divine right of kings, where rights were a matter of birth and not a matter of merit or of nature. And that is what they have succeeded to in the United States. The autocrats have destroyed the Constitution. After all, it is just a written document. It's not law of. It is not created. It is not God that made it. It was man that made it, and therefore man can undo it. Man attempted to achieve what God wants and wanted, but nevertheless, man's destiny is in his or her own hands, and the Constitution was specifically undermined in order for the oligarchs to regain ascendancy in the United States and to once again assume the exalted position that they themselves felt that they were entitled to. So when you have simple-minded people like Mr. Bohannon, who doesn't seem to understand that and who says, well, we have this amendment process, and because the amendment process was done, therefore it is legitimate. There's that kind of simple-minded, backward thinking of the autocrats. The successful brainwashing is when the brainwashed are not aware that they have been brainwashed. And that is the worst kind of arrogance, but it is so very obvious because in the face of all countervailing evidence, they remain steadfast in their beliefs, regardless of how absurd they may be. Those who believe the world is flat continue to do so, regardless of all the evidence to the contrary. These arrogant individuals are impossible to teach because their arrogance denies the possibility of error. And if you have no insight and do not accept the possibility of being in error, then you cannot be taught because you know more than anybody else. So that is who Mr. Bohannon is, and unfortunately most of the rest in the media. But then again, that's why they're in the media. They think they're in the media because of some personal achievement. That is false. They are in the media because the government allows them to be in the media. It allows them to be in the media because they serve the government's purpose. They are brainwashed. And it really doesn't matter if they call themselves liberals or conservatives. They're all equally unprincipled, all equally feeble-minded. And therefore, they were easily manipulated by the government. And that is all the government expects out of members of the media and, by the way, in the system of education, those who may be easily manipulated because that is what the government wants. The government allows them to do and say the usual blather and nonsense and bread and circus, whether it's this, whatever it happens to be. I think a perfect example is this, what is this, Jodi Arias? Is that who that is? Now, which is, of course, of no significance whatsoever, and a year from now, no one will remember who she is. But the question that arises in my mind is, why was this particular case selected by the mass media to gain such importance and airtime? I do not know. Neither individual, either the one that was murdered or the now convicted killer, neither one is of any particular significance. Never was and never will be. The act itself is certainly not unusual. There are thousands of murders committed throughout the world on a monthly basis, far more horrific than that particular one. So I guess if you're the one being murdered, that's about as bad as it can get. But anyway, and so why was that? And the thing is, it was not just one station, one newspaper, one radio station, TV station. It was all the radio stations, all the TV stations. They were waiting with breathless anticipation on the day-to-day goings-on in that nonsensical courtroom with silly prosecutors and defense attorneys and judges and everyone looking on in the silly audience. And why people were paying rapt attention to this nonsense is beyond me. And I don't understand who in authority, because somebody made the decision. Somebody made the decision to make this a big deal. Now, if we can find out who that somebody or somebodies were, I think we can get a pretty good idea as who's running the country today. Because it is befuddling as to how this one particular case gained such nationwide notoriety when there's nothing particular about it. And it shows you the way the media works, that it was picked up by every single major news outlet, every single media source. So I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. But that is the way the system. That is the way the system works. So the government distracts us with this kind of bread and circus, but when the time comes to promote their fiscal cliffs and sequestrations and let's go to war in Afghanistan, then all of these elements are enlisted in order to create a scenario within the public mind that that eventually permits an emotional level which gets us to do what the government wants us to do and make us think it was our idea to begin with. Do we have time for this call? We have to take a quick break. And we'll be back with this more on this. 7 KRV Talkback at Lawrence Gelman, 1-800-580-8255, 1-800-580-TALK. I guess we're back. 7 KRV Talkback, Dr. Lawrence Gelman, home of the Art Microphone, 1-800-580-8255, 1-800-580-TALK. Streaming live on KURV.com and my website, talkbackonline.com. Okay, we have a call from John calling from McAllen. 7 KRV, thanks for calling. Hello. Yes. John, you there? No? John there? Not there? Hung up? Okay. Call back. Call back, John, if you want. Amazing. So we amuse ourselves with sporting events and Dancing with the Stars, and American Idol, and whatever. We amuse ourselves. The government amuses us, and then we accept their legitimacy. And because the government tells us something, we think that it is correct. We wait with bated breath for the Jody Arias decision, the same way we wait with bated breath for the next Supreme Court decision, as if the Supreme Court has any authority as to our daily lives. The Supreme Court has no authority into our daily lives, no authority over the Constitution, no authority over anything really that much. It exists as a body to mediate problems between states or between the United States and foreign powers, and to deal with issues of treason. But it has no authority over individual Americans. It cannot intervene in the internal affairs of a state. And yes, here we are, waiting to hear how the next Supreme Court decision will determine how each and every one of us runs our lives. That isn't completely absurd. Individuals appointed by a president, usually of mediocre intellect, such as a Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, that is then ratified or by a Senate, which is of equally mediocre individuals, and then these individuals who have no science or engineering and very little logic in their processes. Based on that, we have how our lives are going to be determined in the manner that we are to function, not just today, but into the future and the next generation and the generation after that. Does that make any sense to you? Is that what our founding fathers thought that they were creating when they wrote the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, which says that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness? Is that what the pursuit of happiness is that our founding fathers contemplated, to have Barack Obama dictate to us what our future and daily lives ought to be or will be, like it or not? Okay, we have John, 7 KRV. Thanks for calling.
All right, now, I don't know how many people remember this, but right after the war, when they had cyanide gas, Hollywood made a movie starring Susan Hayward, and they just put her in this room and said, "You be a good girl and sit here in this chair."
Susan Hayward?
Cyanide.
Wait.
Yeah.
I know her, the actress.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked her.
Cyanide.
What about her?
She was in a movie called I Want to Live.
Oh, I saw that movie, yeah.
Yeah, they dropped the cyanide gas. It took a long time to kill her.
Yeah.
Then Manson comes along. They don't put him away either. They give him life for doing gambling. How many people remember that? And then the O.J. Simpson chase.
Yeah.
Then he gets off, and then eventually he gets himself in trouble. But
yeah,
it's sensationalism. The media picks a couple cases, blows it up, and everybody gets so involved in it, just like with the Simpson trial and everything else. I mean, it's media sensationalism.
Yeah.
What they print, the newspapers, magazines, it's the same thing. Talk shows, same thing.
Yeah. That's right.
I mean, Sean Hannity and you name them, Rush Limbaugh, blow it up, make it look like the country's gone to hell. We don't have law. Everything's going wrong. I mean, it's just everything and anything. And then that Arias case, well, should she get life? Should she get death? Oh, we don't know yet. And she says, I want to die. Well, let her get executed then.
Well, if she wants to
And then
die, she
there
can
was
always commit suicide, I guess.
there was another one. Gelman, whatever his name is, he requested a firing squad. So it took over a
Oh, the
year.
guy who blew up the Oklahoma City?
No, that was McVeigh. This happened a long time ago. The guy. It was one state where they had an old law that said you could request a firing squad.
Oh.
Guy.
Okay.
And then he requested a firing squad, so it took another year before they could figure out how they were going to do it. I don't know if that was a movie or it did actually happen, though.
No, I remember that. I don't remember the exact circumstances, but I think, he eventually did get his firing squad, if I recall.
Yeah, he did.
So, which is, that's his prerogative, I guess, if you can choose the way that you're going to be executed. I guess if you can choose the way, that's as good as, better than most, I was, I guess.
Well, and then there was another one with Abraham Lincoln. Right after the Indian massacre, Minnesota was going to hang over 300 Indians. Lincoln went over the details and said it was not only 28 could be hung by Mankato. So that's what happened there.
Oh, I don't know about that one, but...
Well, that's Minnesota history.
Oh.
But I mean...
Is that where you're from?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then you got to remember that Nixon got pardoned by Ford.
Yeah.
Presidential pardons.
Yeah.
I mean, you got all these angles that the president could use, and all these state senators could ask for favors and get them. And then you got tenure, and they stay in too long, and they get more powerful as they go along.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be like that, but that's just the way it is, like any other aristocracy.
Yes.
Ours is no different. We have a king, but we call it the presidency. We have an aristocracy, which we call the Congress, and we have the priestly class, and we call it the judiciary. But essentially, it's the same self-anointed elitists who think that they have some right to determine how you and I should live, and that they have a right to be in control. Nothing changes. The psychology of man doesn't change. It's always the same.
And then you get the Supreme Court, you get the Dred Scott decision.
Yeah.
The Negroes can't go across this line, or they can be picked up, executed, or returned to the rafters. But we're all equal under the law. Of course, then we had to fight the Civil War. And then you had King getting shot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then you get these conspiracy theories, 9/11, Kennedy, you name it.
Well, yeah. Well, conspiracy theories are important because it draws attention from the real problem, which is the government. The government is the real source of all of our problems. And the government is the one that promotes conspiracy theories because most conspiracy theories are completely absurd. And so so anyone coming forth with a conspiracy theory is considered a nut, is a fruitcake. And so when people say that the United States government was behind the World Trade Center attack, and you have these nutcases go out there talking about secret military units going into the World Trade Center and putting charges along the shafts of the elevator, as if that could be done. Nobody knows about it. And that's what brought down the World Trade Center. And then everybody thinks, well, these people are complete nuts. But the fact of the matter is that, those guys are nuts, but those are government plans. Those are people the government itself has hired to do that job in order to draw attention away from the true conspiracy, which was that the United States government creates an environment that allows these things to happen. That's really all there is. That's really all there is to it. The United States government sets up a scenario inviting a terrorist attack and waiting for it to occur so that we can justify whatever intervention we want to do. And it could have been an attack on the Golden Gate Bridge or the Sears Tower or any other well-known national edifice, and the response would have been the same. It turned out to be the World Trade Center, but it could have been a number of other places which would have had the exact same effect. So that's what the government does. It creates a scenario. It's a lure. It creates a lure. The victim falls into the lure, whether it is the Germans in World War I, with the attack on merchant marines shipping, whether it's the Japanese attack of Pearl Harbor, or the sinking of the Maine, the attack on Fort Sumter, the what else? Whatever other things.
Remember the main Teddy Roosevelt that goes into there, and then we get the Philippine Islands, and then in World War II we have to defend the Philippines. I mean, then MacArthur goes back there, but then he saved Japan. Roosevelt could have prevented World War II, really, if he wanted to, but didn't. So, I mean, all these things are theories that could have been Iran in Iraq. We should have just let those countries go after each other.
Well, so we're the ones who built up Saddam Hussein, and then we destroyed him. So we're the ones who built up Mubarak, and then we undercut him. We're the ones who became allies with Muammar Gaddafi, then we double-crossed him. We were buddies with this guy Assad in Syria, and now we're double-crossing him. The whole thing is completely, typical. Can't say it's absurd because of what the United States government wants to do. Franklin Roosevelt wanted to go to war because Roosevelt was a fascist allied with the fascist Stalin. They liked each other. They agreed. They philosophically agreed with each other, and so Stalin was being beaten up by Hitler. Roosevelt wanted to save Stalin, his blood brother, and then concocted this whole deal to get us involved into World War II. What people don't seem to remember is that France and Britain declared war on Germany. Everybody seems to think that Germany just went haywire and Hitler went and attacked France for no particular reason other than personal aggrandizement. They seem to forget, or is never mentioned, like in a movie, what was that, A King's Speech? They neglected to mention that it was England and France that declared war on Germany. It wasn't Germany declaring war on England and France. It was England and France declared war on Germany. So why, and based upon Germany's attack on Poland. Well, another country attacked Poland at the same time called the Soviet Union. But why didn't France and Britain declare war on the Soviet Union? They declared war on Germany. Why didn't they declare war on the Soviet Union? Because the Soviet Union had so many spies in the French and the British government that their foreign policy was dictated by Soviet agents. That's why they didn't declare war on the Soviet Union. Why doesn't anyone ask that question? You can go to school for 100 years and no one ever explains to you that, oh, by the way, Britain and France declared war on Germany, and by the way, they declared war on Germany because Germany attacked Poland. But why didn't Germany and why didn't France and Britain declare war on the Soviet Union if they were acting in defense of Poland?
It's ridiculous. Just like when Roosevelt got an actual declaration of war, but only against Japan. So we were only at war with Japan, and then Hitler said, well, we're at war with the United States. So then we declared war on Germany officially.
Right. So, it was simply... the United States was trying to get either Japan or Germany to attack us. That's what they were trying to do, and Japan fell for the bait, attacked us in Pearl Harbor. But the United States had 4 carriers in the Pacific Fleet. Not a single carrier happened to be in Pearl Harbor at the time of the attack.
Exactly right.
What a coincidence that was. They were all out somewhere.
That's the way they were going to win the war.
Yeah, because with the carriers, that's what did it. We lost, 1,500, 2,000 sailors, a number of battleships. Big deal.
Absolutely, Arizona. They're going to scrap it anyway.
So they had these meaningless battleships. The United States sacrificed those sailors, and then we had our 4 carriers out to sea, and which is what, of course, if those carriers had been destroyed, it'd have been a whole different game in the Pacific. but the carriers survived. The United States was able to launch countermeasures against the Japanese. So, I mean, the whole thing is just that what we are taught in school and what these 25-year-olds in the media that CNN and Fox News keeps putting on TV that are only put there because they're attractive. These brainless, these airheads that they put on there that we watch because I don't know why. And 24 hours a day, it's just brainwashing. 24-hour a day brainwashing.
You take that all away and go back to only the major networks would be a lot different.
Yeah, I mean, I don't look. This is nothing but 1984 with the TV screen telling us that we love Big Brother. That's all it is.
Yeah.
A little more sophisticated, but no different than that. It's just that we love Big Brother. We love the president. President, tell us what we need to do. You're the guy in charge. You're the king. I tell you, I would like to run
it's no British. It's no different than the British system. That's what we ended up with.
Oh, well, they love their king and queen, don't they? To me, it makes it makes me sick. King and queen, give me a break. This stupid, was it Prince Andrew? Who's this guy running around?
Yeah. He comes over here, too.
I mean, what? Here's the guy, Prince Andrew, by birth, he made him make a big, and who falls all over him? Hollywood and politics, right? That's who fall, and the media. I couldn't care less about this guy, but they follow this guy around like he's some kind of second coming. The thing is completely.
Well, just like Australia doesn't have any time for that crap anymore. Canada tolerates it, but I mean they're all independent. They aren't British subjects anymore.
Hey, what country is more enthralled with the royalty of England than the United States?
We are.
Yeah. What country more than... Here we are, the country that got rid of those characters, and who's the country that is most, loves the royalty? Then the United States. Oh, the United States loves royalty. Because
that's why we did the invasion of Normandy. Churchill was right. We should have just let the Russians and the Germans fight it out, and then sometime along the line, we do what we want to do. Go into Italy.
That would have been the smarter thing to do, but that wasn't. Remember, that wasn't Roosevelt's goal. Roosevelt's goal was to save Stalin.
Roosevelt's goal was set up after the Cold War, so Stalin could take it all over, including Poland again.
Right. Big deal. We liberated France and Britain. Who cares? And we sold out Czechoslovakia, Poland, all of Eastern Europe, and then we sold out all of China.
Yeah, Germany, part of Germany.
Yeah, we handed it all over to the communists. So we bailed out Britain and France, which is probably a mistake. And then, so we saved 100 million people, and we sold 1 billion people into bondage, as well as turning over a bunch of Germans and Russians over to Stalin, and he could go ahead and slaughter. Okay, let me take this other call here. Thanks for calling, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah, bye.
Okay, bye. Now we have Fred calling from Alamo, 7 KRV. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, Dr. Gelman.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. You're a medical doctor, correct?
That's right.
Now, what qualifies you as a military affairs know-it-all? You're talking about the carriers back in 1941. 1941.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it possible those carriers, 4 of them, were out in training maneuvers?
There's all kinds of excuses what they were doing, but the issue is why, coincidentally, were all 4 out of Pearl Harbor at the same time? Why were 2 of them specifically delayed in the Pacific by order for no particular reason?
Have you ever been to Pearl Harbor?
No.
No. Well, sir, let me tell you, Pearl Harbor is a tight space. There's only so many ships that fit into that area.
Well, what's that got to do with what's that got to do with no carriers being at Pearl Harbor at the time?
Because they're waiting for space.
They're waiting for space. Well, let me ask you this. Why didn't the Japanese wait until the carriers were back? Why did they Why did they attack at that particular time?
Well-
Didn't you tell me Roosevelt wasn't aware? Roosevelt wasn't aware that the attack was coming. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. But according to statistics, okay, there was Japanese spies around the area, and they were spying on the harbor itself.
Yeah.
And they had battleships, destroyers, tenders, cruisers, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It was full of ships. Now, how can you fit 4 carriers into that tight spot?
Look, those carriers were assigned to Pacific Fleet. They were assigned to Pearl Harbor, and they weren't there.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
that's the bottom line. They weren't there, and it's an incredible coincidence. And you don't have to be I don't have to be in the military, or I don't have to be in the police force. I don't have to be in the police force to be able to understand crime and murder. I don't have to be a lawyer to understand law. Okay, so I don't have to be in the military to understand military tactics. And besides that, there are a lot of generals that don't seem to understand military tactics either, looking at the way wars have been fought. So, I mean, my point is that the whole situation was contrived by the United States government in order to get us into a war to save Stalin. Now, if you don't agree with that, then that's fine. But tell me why you think we went to war then.
Oil.
Oil? We went to war for oil? Okay. How was going to war in 1941 going to...
There was an embargo back then.
What? I'm having a little trouble. This line isn't so good. What was that?
Japan attacked Manchuria, and they were attacking...
That was in the 1930s.
1939.
Yeah.
1938, 1939.
Yeah, that's right.
And the United States put an embargo on oil and steel back then.
No. The United States did it in 1941. In November of 1941, if you know your history, you'll see that the embargo was in place in November of 1941 against Japan.
Well, that's why Japan attacked Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Is embargoing oil and steel into a country an act of war?
Yes, it is.
So then who did the first act of war, the United States or Japan?
Japan.
Wait a minute. It was the United States that put the embargo on oil. So they did the first act of war. Yeah?
But Japan retaliated against that.
That's right, but the United States instigated the war. Why did we do that? Why was it important for the United States to instigate? Hey, Fred, I got to go here. You can call back if you want. 7 in KRV, Talkback Dr. Lawrence Gelman. We have to go to a break. Thanks for calling. (710) KRV Talkback, Dr. Lawrence Gelman. Hold there on microphone, streaming live on KURV.com. 1-800-580-8255, 1-800-580-TALK. Website is talkbackonline.com. I think that's everything. Okay, what were we talking about? Conspiracies, right. So, don't you find it peculiar that the United States keeps getting attacked? The United States, the most powerful nation in the world for a long, long time, keeps getting attacked by these pipsqueak nations that couldn't have no possible way of overthrowing the United States. Don't you find it very odd that we're just minding our own business, sitting around doing nothing, having a good old time looking at the sunsets, and then these nefarious, nasty pipsqueak nations like Afghanistan, Japan, Spain, others, North Korea, and they just go ahead and attack us for it. What the heck, Here we are doing nothing, spending our time on the beaches of Pearl Harbor, and then these nasty Japanese people come along and attack us. Or here we are having a good time on the beaches of Cuba, and those nasty Spaniards come along and attack us, and then we go ahead and take over all their possessions. You know, we're sitting here, and the Germans attack us just for no reason whatsoever. So we retaliate by taking over Europe, right? I mean, don't you find it odd? Don't you find it odd? The United States, because the United States, the Ottoman Empire was going. So we took over. The whole Ottoman Empire was destroyed. The Habsburg Empire was destroyed. We wiped out the Japanese, the Germans, the Spanish. All their possessions were taken. We're just poor little United States, just minding our own business, and then then we end up with all the possessions of these other countries. Wow, wasn't that just a lucky break for us? Anyway, now we have see here, Scott. Is that? I hope I got the right one here. Okay, Scott, 7 KRV, Talkback. Thanks for calling. What's up?
Hey, good afternoon, Doctor. I've been to Hawaii quite a few times. In fact, as early as 1973 was the first time I flew into Hawaii and went to Oahu. And as I went into Honolulu Airport, I looked at the harbor on the west side of Ala Moana and Pearl Harbor, and there's plenty of harbor space in there. There's some deep water in there, and there's plenty of room for any type of boats you want in there.
Hey,
they
look,
have that very well situated.
I'm not the
I don't
guy.
know where he came about.
I'm not the guy. I'm not the guy who decided the carriers ought to be there. The United States Navy assigned 4 carriers to the Pacific Fleet, and their harbor is Pearl Harbor. I'm not the guy who made that up. The United States Navy did that. What's he talking about? Those 4 carriers were assigned to the Pacific Fleet, and they just all happened to be out somewhere on December 7th.
Yeah, you can put all 4 of those carriers. When they put that up to where you have 4 carriers, you can sit 4 carriers in that harbor, no sweat at all. That's a deep water harbor, and it's got plenty of access to go in and out of pretty easily. So I don't know where he came up with that. I've seen it many, many a times, and I've been to Hawaii about 8 times, and I always look through Pearl Harbor from the airplane coming into Honolulu, and there's plenty of room there. So that
Scott,
all 4 of them could have been there if they wanted. Easily.
And at least 2 of those carriers were specifically supposed to be there at the time and were sent out just a week or so before for unexplained reasons. And another carrier that was in California was supposed to be in Pearl Harbor at the time, but was delayed in California for unexplained reasons. And so, but when you're the thing about being brainwashed is you don't know you're brainwashed. I mean, that's what successful brainwashing is.
Well, Doctor, look at the media nowadays. They've manipulated that Jodi Arias trial since stage 1. They've manipulated the jury, the judge, the whole trial. It's just like a Hollywood script. They've made those people all a bunch of actors, Hollywood actors. They can hardly wait until a movie gets out. You got a narcissist, psycho killer like Jodi Arias there. She's just feeding off of this. The media's feeding off of it. The ratings are going up. Ratings is money. Money goes to those corporations. Of course, the politicians are with the FCC. They're all inside this whole thing, too. And they manipulate this case from start to finish, make a big scene out of it. They make our judicial system look ridiculous. And that's their whole goal. They started this manipulating when they got her out there in the first part and got her out there lying in the first part of her little stage of what went on. Then the second stage, and finally they got her enough evidence on her. They took her to trial.
What was the one before?
And she's been convicted, and they can't even come up because they're still being manipulated by the news media.
What was the one just before this? This other one where the woman was accused of killing her little girl. Remember that one about a year ago?
The lady from Florida?
I don't remember where. Remember that one that she got off? She was...
Yeah, she got off, and I think then she had to go hide away because there were some people probably after her because she was so guilty of it. And
I know, but I mean, this happens every...
It was ridiculous.
And then before that, it was the octuplets, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's always amazing. And the amazing thing to me is every single news outlet picks it up. Not just half of them or 75% of them or 90% of them, 100%. We're all like a bunch of bobbleheads, What happened? You still there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Thought we got
one more thing I wanted to say, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You notice all these big, heavy tornadoes that came down in Tornado Alley. These people always rebuild right there in Tornado Alley consistently. But you notice the Democrats, especially Gore and a few of his other buddies, the first thing they had to come back down was CO2 carbons. We're having global warming again. It's the global warming that's causing these big
climate
F4
change.
and F5. That's the first thing they had to hit on. And Mark Levin was the first guy. Before, I know you've always given us the scientific evidence, but Mark Levin finally had to get on it and show the Democrats right what's going on scientifically, that they're wrong again and their propaganda BS is not going to hold up this time.
Well, the problem is that there's a lot of people out there that benefit from that propaganda.
Oh, these guys all make $1 million off their books and everything about global warming. They don't have any scientific evidence to back it up at all. I mean, they just keep saying that all this CO2 is coming out, fossil fuel is all the cause of all these big hurricanes that are starting. Like, what about the jet stream dipping down and having late cold fronts coming in when you have hot moisture coming all the way through the valley here from the Gulf all the way up to Oklahoma, and then you have this cold air hit the hot air, and it dips it down enough and stalls it out. That's what causes it, not global warming.
Well, you're exactly right. But the first thing is that fossil fuels are nothing but organic substance. You and I are organic substance. Fossil fuel is nothing but you and me 1 million years from now. Okay? So these people don't understand that it's a natural substance. All we're doing is burning a natural substance that the only reason the carbon dioxide wasn't released earlier is that this stuff got trapped underground somewhere and compressed into a high energy form. 97% of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere comes from natural processes, the breakdown of organic substances, the metabolic processes. Only 3% of the carbon dioxide in the environment comes from fossil fuels. The whole thing is completely absurd. And 95% of the greenhouse gas molecules is water. The whole thing is such nonsense. Hey, thanks for calling. Let me move along here a little bit. Let's see what we got. Gus? Gus calling from, getting confused. Gus calling from Harlingen. Thanks. 7 KRV Talkback. Thanks for calling.
Yes, sir. Thank you much for what you do.
Okay.
Listening to you educate us like this, it's and I'm educated, but it just brings other little things to mind. Like, this guy's a constitutional professor, and don't you think that he could manipulate this system and create that crisis right before 2016 when he knows that there's no Democrat that could ever beat anybody because the scandals that are breaking through?
You're talking about Barack Obama, I guess?
Right.
Well, Barack Obama is no constitutional scholar. He's not a scholar at all.
Exactly.
But are you saying, in the back of are you saying that he's going to create some kind of scenario which allows him to continue as president? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. That it's very possible because these guys have shown no regard for constitutional law. They've shown exactly the opposite, a plan to try to undermine constitutional law.
No, I agree with that, and I think that's the fear in the back of everyone's mind. But the problem that we have, Gus, in this country is that about 40 or 50% of the people want a permanent king. And Barack Obama fits that title or that position very, very well. And you see, that's you and I, for us, it's so hard to imagine that a nincompoop like Barack Obama could actually be president of the United States. And the thing is, the reason he's there is because there are a lot of people who prefer to be slaves, and they live in this country.
Exactly.
And the government is in the business of creating slaves. So, I think I can assure you this. I think you're correct, that there are people in the administration that are trying to devise a way, to figure out a way to keep Barack Obama as president, because I agree with you that it's highly unlikely that the country is stupid enough to elect another president. But to reelect an incumbent is a lot easier thing to do. And, of course, to create a crisis, I don't know what kind of a crisis they could create, but I think Barack Obama's presidency has been nothing other than the creation of crises. Because if you look at the world situation before Barack Obama and now, if you look at the Middle East, at Russia, North Korea, If you look at the world economies, the riots that are going on in Sweden and Greece, and Greece, if you look at all the upheaval in the world that have occurred since Barack Obama became president, I mean, it looks like, and which he is helping, Syria, Egypt, all these things that are going on, that he is responsible for. Barack Obama is responsible for all of this. You might have to think that you might consider the possibility that Barack Obama is trying to create a scenario which the people would say, no, stay as president. We need you. Without you, we're going to fall apart. I mean,
just like FDR.
I don't think there's any. I think for sure there are people in his organization that are trying to do that. And considering the fact how much turmoil they've created in the world, they've bankrupted the United States. They've bankrupted much of the rest of the world. We've got conflict all over the world, uprisings everywhere. When you have economic crisis is when Hitler's come along and Stalin's come along and Franklin Roosevelt's come along. That's when you get the great dictators. So, it's possible.
And it's worrisome because this guy got a Nobel Peace Prize. And the most worrisome thing of all is that he's from Chicago, and Rahm Emanuel never let a crisis go to waste. I mean, I can't help but believe these guys are trying to create one.
Well, they're trying to create crises because that's how they manipulate people's emotions. And, we'll see what... the best thing in the world is the truth. And if there are people like you and me out there stating, watch out for this character, he's up to no good, then maybe other people will wake up too, and maybe they won't be able to finagle their way into it. What gets me about Franklin Roosevelt is that the economic situation in the United States was worse after his first term than when he went into office, and he still got reelected. Okay,
exactly. Parallel.
Yeah. Thanks for calling, Gus. Okay, now we have Fred call back. Okay, Fred, you're back from Alamo. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for calling, Gus. Okay, now we have Fred.
I think you got your radio on or something. What have we got here?
Okay, now we have.
Hello?
Yeah, do we have do you have your radio on or something?
Yeah, I did. I turned it down.
Oh, okay. All right, go on. Yeah.
We're good to go now.
Right.
All right, Doc.
Yeah.
Listen, back, the caller that called a while ago, he said he flew into Oahu back in 1973.
All right.
Remember that? Okay. This happened like 1941. It was like 32 years ago.
This is, once again, not relevant. This is not relevant. Remember, when we left off our discussion, I was asking you.
Well, sir.
Yeah.
Doctor.
Yeah.
You said 4 carriers. There's only 2 carriers, the Hornet, the Enterprise. The other 2 was in Atlantic.
No, you're wrong. You can look it up.
Well,
I have the order. There were 4. Look, you're wrong. Let's just, okay, you're wrong. There were 4 carriers. Look it up yourself. Now, the thing is, one was, okay, look it up yourself. So,
well, okay, fine. Then name them.
We forget about that. The point that we were discussing.
Can you name them?
I'll look it up. Look, you know what? It's not relevant. My question to you is, what was the reason what was the reason we went to war in World War II? Give me, what was the reasons that we went to war?
Which war? I mean,
World War II. I said World War II.
Japan. Which one are you talking about?
We went to war against the Axis powers in World War II, which were Italy, right? Italy, Germany, and Japan. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So?
Why did we go to war?
My God, man. Don't you know?
I do know. I want you to tell me.
Well, wasn't Hitler back in 1932 when he came to power? I believe it was 1933.
Yeah.
When he came into power, wasn't he destroying everything?
What does that mean, destroying everything? What do you mean destroying everything? Like what?
Taking power.
He took power. Yeah, he wasn't the only guy. What about Stalin? He took power.
We're talking about Japan here, man.
You're the one. You talk about Germany now. You're the one who went to Germany. You said 1932, Hitler started destroying everything. That's what you brought that up. Didn't you?
You know what?
What?
You're a medical doctor.
Yeah.
I think I suggest you stick to that profession because you're not doing good in your history books.
Well, did he leave? Hey, Fred. Hey, Fred, come back. You never answered the question. I'm not doing good. I gotta go. The United States. Why did the United States go to war in World War II? Because Japan attacked Pearl Harbor? Well, that's a little bit simplistic. Why did Japan attack Pearl Harbor? Because the United States placed an oil and steel embargo on Japan. That's an act of war. How many of you even are aware of that? Are you aware the United States was attacking German shipping in the Atlantic? The United States was attacking Japanese shipping in the Pacific prior to December of 1941? How many of you are aware that Franklin Roosevelt was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy in 1917, and it was his idea to put munitions on merchant marine ships and letting the Germans know about it in order to lure the Germans into attacking United States shipping. And it wasn't the sinking of the Lusitania. Everybody talks about the Lusitania. The Lusitania was sunk in 1915. That was more than 2 years before the United States actually declared war on Germany. And by the way, the United States declared war on Germany, okay? So this is all a bunch of nonsense. What do we go to? Why do we go to? What is it we learn in our history classes? What we learn is what the government wants us to know. That's all. The brainwashing. I mean, it's amazing. They always show on these TV programs. They talk about these walkabouts where they go ask Americans what they know about history or civics, and the ignorance. The ignorance that Americans demonstrate. There was one, I think it was Bill. I was sitting there watching. I don't watch Bill O'Reilly because I don't think too much of him to begin with. But he was over in Manhattan, and he asked a student who the vice president was, and he didn't know. This guy didn't know who the vice president was, and he was a college student going to Berkeley in California. He didn't know that's the kind of, that's the kind of person they want at Berkeley. It's not despite of his ignorance, it's because he wanted to be in Berkeley. Okay, Fred's question: the four carriers, the Enterprise, Lexington, Saratoga, and Yorktown, were the carriers that were supposed to be assigned to the to Pearl Harbor at the time, and they were all mysteriously not around. So that's the Hornet, Yorktown, Saratoga, Lexington, Enterprise. Actually, there were more than four carriers or major battleships were not available. The Hornet, commissioned in late October 1941, had already been transferred to from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Was delayed in getting to the Pacific. The Saratoga was being outfitted in California, so she was mysterious. The Lexington was sent out a few days before. The Enterprise was sent out in November. It's all so the carrier fleet, which is all assigned, and the four carriers, Hornet, Saratoga, Lexington, and Enterprise, were all mysteriously out of Pearl Harbor at the time. So there. As well as many other of the major battleships that were assigned to Pacific Fleet were also not there. All very peculiar. There were the Japanese spies who were spies for the Soviet Union, by the way. There were, the Soviet Union had Japanese spies as they had American spies. that were formulating foreign policy. The importance of spies is not in this ridiculous cloak and dagger stuff that you see on TV. That is of no consequence whatsoever. It's just this cloak and dagger nonsense of James Bond baloney. The real importance of a spy is how it affects policy. The spies in the United States that were in the United States government, including the advisors to Franklin Roosevelt, Alger Hiss and his brother, Owen Lattimore, Harry Hopkins, this by memory, Harry Dexter White, and others. It was Harry Dexter White that gave the Soviet Union the plates in order to print up current war dollars. War dollars were international currency backed up by the United States dollar that was given to United States allies in order to bolster up their economies, war currency. The plates used to produce war currency were given by Harry Dexter White, Secretary of the Treasury, Assistant Secretary of Treasury, to Joseph Stalin, and which is not a secret, that is well known. The only question is why it was done, in which the Soviet Union printed up hundreds of millions of dollars, which today is hundreds of billions of dollars, which was used specifically to finance the takeover of Eastern Europe, and including East Germany, and to bolster up the Stalinist Soviet Empire. That was done by Harry Dexter White, Assistant Secretary of the Treasury under Franklin Roosevelt. The foreign policy that handed over Manchuria to Mao Zedong, the weapons in Manchuria, where did Mao Zedong get the money and the weapons to defeat the nationalist armies of Chiang Kai-shek? It all came from the United States. Every bit of. Where do you think it came from? The Soviets were using American weapons and money. Most of the world were using American weapons and money. We left untold tons of material in Manchuria, and we left it for Mao Zedong to take. That was done expressly through orders of Alger Hiss, who is a convicted Soviet spy. Harry Hopkins is the one who created the Yalta Agreement that handed over Poland and all of Eastern Europe to the Soviets. The United States foreign policy was dictated by Soviet spies. Owen Lattimore, Harry Dexter White, Lachlan Curie. The Japanese did not want to go to war with the United States. They knew it was a dangerous situation to do. The Japanese wanted desperately to negotiate a settlement with the United States concerning the Pacific region, which the Japanese felt was really their sphere of influence, which in one sense they were correct. Those attempts to reach an agreement were specifically blocked by people like Owen Lattimore, Lachlan Curie. They have specifically stopped those cables from being getting to the United States, and that advised against any type of communication with the Japanese. They were also the individuals who devised the strategy of embargo and aggression that led the Japanese that painted them into a corner in which they felt there was no other option than to eliminate the United States in the Pacific region, which was a mistake on their part. The Soviets had spies in Japan, Japanese who worked for the Soviet, the same way that they had Americans who worked for the Soviets, as well as they had the Cambridge Five, Blount, I can't remember their names, the 5 members that came out of Cambridge that worked in the intelligence division, Kim Philby, among others, John Cairncross or something like that, who who were Soviet spies who were KGB spies that worked in the intelligence service of the British intelligence service. Among the things they did, besides getting Britain and to get into war with Germany, was that after the war, they all the attempts of the freedom fighters in Albania and Poland and other places were double-crossed by the spies in the British Ministry of Intelligence Ministry, the M5 or whatever M7, M5, whatever they call themselves. The British, of course, were with a lot of communication with the United States intelligence, and there's no question whatsoever that both governments were heavily infiltrated with Soviet spies. Harold Wilson himself is very likely was a Soviet prime minister of England. Very likely was a KGB agent as well. You have these spies and useful dupes, the United States government, people like Fred, who are useful dupes and believe the party line, and who can't see history for the way history is. It really is. The United States goes to war supposedly to free Europe, and at the end of the war, we give half of Europe to Stalin to enslave. Czechoslovakia and Finland, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Eastern Germany, Albania, what else? Can't remember all the countries. Bulgaria, that we sold into bondage. China, which we handed over to the Chinese communist thugs. Butchers, these all were. So we liberated England, which is already free anyway. So we liberated what? We liberated France, and that turned out to be a great deal, right? We liberated France, which probably the Soviets were glad to give us France, because they're kind of a weakened group anyway. And they took over. So we liberated France, and in return, we gave them all of Eastern Europe, Eastern Germany, and all of China and Southeast Asia. Well, that was a really good deal. Okay, we have to go to a break. 7 KRV, Talkback, Dr. Lawrence Gelman, hold on their microphone, streaming live on KURV.com. Okay, we're back. Trying to educate, trying to search for the truth beneath the mountains and mountains of media lies that are out there. The media is used primarily as the means to indoctrinate through propaganda. That's why the media exists. That's why it exists in every country. That's why it exists in the United States. The media is most effective when it has the appearance of independence. But if you look at the United States media, there's nothing independent about it. Every station has exactly the same stories running at the same time. They all talk about the same things, and they're all basically pro-big government. How do we know that? Because every single journalist, so-called journalist or commentator on these stations always asks the same question: what will the president do about the economy? Now, that already makes an assumption that the president is in charge of the economy. And once you've made that assumption, you've already defeated the purpose of the Constitution. It really doesn't matter what the president does about the economy or what he says he's going to do about the economy. The fact that the question is even asked shows you our lack of knowledge about the ideology of the nation's founding. If you look at the Constitution of the United States, you will find there is no reference to the president as to managing the economy whatsoever. And there's very little in the Constitution at all about the economy. In fact, the basic structure of the Constitution says the government is supposed to stay out of the economy. The government is supposed to prevent states from creating tariffs. That's what the Commerce Clause is all about. The United States is supposed to protect copyright protections. The United States government is supposed to prevent interference into contracts. If you look at what the Constitution is, it is not an enumeration of powers. It is more of an enumeration of what the government is not allowed to do. Of the 17 functions given to the United States government in the Constitution through the Congress in the Constitution, and by the way, the other branches of governments have no function along these lines whatsoever. The laws are made by the Congress, executed by the president, and then when they're broken, they're looked at by the judiciary. The judiciary does not dictate what the law is or what's constitutional and what's not constitutional. That's a bunch of nonsense. Fabrication. There are 17 functions given to the Congress. 8 of them have to do with national defense. Creation of Navy and armies, borrowing for war, providing for national defense, things along those lines. That's what the United States government is supposed to be doing. Essentially, that is the reason that we have a national government, is to provide for a national defense. So if one state is attacked, it can be defended by a national defense. The other thing that the government is for is to maintain peace among the states and to maintain a uniformity of interactions between states. It is functions between states. It is function between states and foreign nations. It is functions of national defense or a common defense, as it's referred to. That is the purpose of a national government. Not the Environmental Protection Agency and not the Occupational Health and Safety Agency, not the Equal Employment and Opportunity Commission, not the whatever else is out there taking away from our freedoms and invading our private lives. The United States government has no authority to initiate war without congressional approval, but we do so anyway, as we are in the midst of one now. The United States government has no authority to be enmeshed in foreign affairs. Regardless, there we are. We have American soldiers in 150 countries. The United States central government was supposed to be very, very limited in its function, and the United States government has no implied powers. It only has enumerated powers. All implied powers by the 9th and 10th Amendment. 9th Amendment says the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. And the 10th Amendment says the powers not delegated by the Constitution to the United States, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively and to the people. What that means is simply this: powers and rights not given to the government, specifically enumerated in the Constitution, can never be taken by the federal government. That they can only be taken; they are only owned property of the people and the states. The balance of power in any society is between the people and the government, and it's a fixed sum. Therefore, any power increased by the government can only take away power from the people. That is unconstitutional. There is nothing in the Constitution that permits the shifting of power from the people to the government or the increase of power within the federal government. There is nothing that permits that. If a power is not enumerated to the federal government in the Constitution, it does not exist for the federal government. And that is it. The federal personal income tax is a power that is not enumerated in the Constitution. As such, it can never be constitutional. It doesn't matter if you have an amendment. That's irrelevant. It's laws made by man, therefore they can be subverted by man. But the fact of the matter is, and the government can do unconstitutional things, as with the banning of alcohol, for example, which was overturned by the government itself. The government can do unconstitutional things that does not make it legitimate. The federal government does not have the authority to implement a direct tax on individuals. That is specifically within the Constitution. The federal government is not permitted to do so. Just because it does so doesn't make it legitimate. You know, the divine right of kings was once considered legitimate, or was considered legal. That does not make it legitimate. It does not. But people lived under those rules for hundreds and hundreds of years, and in some places do so today. In fact, in most places do so today. In the United States is one place where it is done. You think we live in a free society? We don't live in a free society. Go smoke marijuana and see what happens to you. Go ahead and take cocaine, see what happens to you. Don't pay your federal income tax and see what happens to you. Just because you pay your extortionist racket amount, the mafia comes to your restaurant and says, give us $10 and we won't blow up your restaurant. So you give them $10 and you go about your business. Does that mean you're free because your restaurant is not blown up? Because you pay a $10 bribe or $10 extortion fee? You pay your income tax and you're able to walk the streets. Does that mean you're a free person? Most of the people in Russia, the vast majority of people in Russia, the vast majority of people in Cuba walk about without any problems. They may not have enough food or may have to wait in line for a potato. They can't buy a cell phone, and the government restricts pretty much everything. But as long as you remain within the guidelines the government has dictated, then you can do whatever else is left. The United States has wider boundaries of restrictions, but that doesn't mean we're a free people. You think you're a free person? I mean, it's ridiculous. You think you're free because you're able to go out to a grocery store and buy a potato? You think you're free? You're no more free than the person in the Soviet Union that had to wait in line to get the potato. You're no more free. You go to the airport and you get frisked and you get searched and you get ID'd. Well, that's being free. What happens if you don't? What if you tell them, no, I'm not going to tell you my name? Well, you don't get on the airplane, do you? Maybe you go to jail. No, I'm not walking through the scanner. Oh, well, if you don't want that, then you have to be patted down. Oh, no, I don't want to be patted down. Well, then you're not getting on the airplane, or maybe you're going to jail. That's a free society? That's what you consider a free society? Your money is taken from you through taxes and then is spent in sending our boys and women, girls and women and men to war in Afghanistan. Is that a free society? You go buy something and you have to pay a sales tax. Say, I'm not going to pay the sales tax. Well, then you don't get the item. Is that a free society? You own a piece of property and they have a property tax. I'm not paying the property tax because it's supposed to be a free society. So you don't pay the property tax. What happens to your property? It gets confiscated by the mafia, otherwise known as the United States government or the state governments. Is that what you call a free society? How is this a free society? If you were a slave on a plantation, for the most part, you didn't have shackles. You weren't chained to anything. You went out there, and as long as you did your work, you got your food, you got your housing, you got to wander around. Was that a free society? As long as they remained within the confines of the rules set by the owner of the plantation, then they would go about, they could do whatever else was left that they were allowed to do. Is that a free society? We are allowed to do what is left to do. The government doesn't restrict us from doing. That doesn't make us free. We're not a free society. We're a brainwashed society. Psychological brainwashing is even better than a chain. If you're chained to a wall, you pretty well know that you're not free. That chain, if you forget, that chain is a reminder every day, every minute, every second that you are not free. So you know, at least you're enslaved, it's true, but at least you're aware of it. But when they teach you in school that the government is good, and they teach you that paying taxes is your patriotic duty, and that support of the government is your patriotic duty, and government service is your patriotic duty, and that anyone who doesn't want to pay taxes is an evil person, not doing their duty. Sending our men and women to war in Iraq is our duty to do that. And you believe it, and you believe that's true, and you believe that's a patriotic duty. You believe that's constitutional, well, then you've been brainwashed. You've been effectively brainwashed by the government. So you're psychologically brainwashed. You're psychologically enslaved. And it is much worse to be psychologically enslaved than it is to be physically enslaved, because then you're not aware that you're enslaved. You're living in the Matrix, like the movie The Matrix, where what you see is not reality, where you think you're free, but you're really a slave working for others. Because that's what we are in the United States. As a citizen of this country, we are nothing but slaves working for the government. That's the only reason we're allowed to exist. That's the only reason we're allowed to do what we do, is because we serve the government. And when you stop serving the government, you'll see what happens to you. The government basically creates a population of servants and a population of slaves and dependents. 40% of the population is dependent upon the federal government through food stamps, welfare, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. We're dependent upon the government. What is slavery except dependence? When you're dependent on someone, aren't you a slave? If you're dependent on Social Security, aren't you a slave to Social Security and therefore to the government, which gives you the check? If you belong to Medicare for your health care, are you not therefore a slave to Medicare? Are you not therefore dependent upon government and a slave to government? If you're on Medicaid, are you not a slave to government? What about the rest of us who pay taxes to fund Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid? Are we not slaves also? Are we not giving money to something that we don't want any part of? Because if Social Security and Medicare were voluntary, nobody would belong to them. That's why they're involuntary programs. If they were so great, why are they involuntary? If the programs of Social Security and Medicare were such great programs, if you have life insurance, no one forces you to buy life insurance. You do so because you want to. If you buy health insurance, nobody forces you to buy health insurance. You do so because you want to. Do you want to be part of the Medicare system? Do you want to be part of Social Security? Well, the government doesn't care if you want to or not, because you have to. And if it was such a great program, why do you have to belong? Why can't you want to belong? The government knows that no one wants to belong to these programs because they're poorly managed and corrupt, and basically function to empower and enrich government to gain control over the American people. And most of us understand that, if not overtly, at least subliminally or subconsciously, we understand that. We understand that we are really toadies working for the government. As long as you pay your taxes and toe to the line and don't cause too much trouble, and really believe Barack Obama should be king, then you're going to be able to function without too much restriction. But if you want to smoke marijuana, and if you want to take cocaine, you want to not pay your income tax and not pay Social Security, if you don't want to be part of Medicare and Medicaid, and you're part of Medicaid whether you're getting benefits or not, because you're paying for it whether you get benefits or not. So you're part of Medicaid, like it or not. Okay, that's it. You're either receiving benefits or you're paying for the benefits, but you're in the system, like it or not. And it's corrupt, completely corrupt. They're having these little novellas on TV, right? They had one on Pablo Escobar, and now they have one concerning this, this Mexican warlord drug dealer. The one in Mexico is not really well done. But people watch it because there's a lot of sex and murder and violence, so people watch it because of that. And if you take a step back, and you realize that all of this stuff is contrived by government. Drug cartels exist because certain drugs are arbitrarily made illegal. Cocaine is illegal, but alcohol is not. You can get, if you take heroin, you can take morphine by prescription, that's legal. If you take not by prescription, it's not. So the illicit drug trade is created through government policy. People want to take cocaine and smoke marijuana. The government says that's not legal, and so the people want it. So when people want something, there's always going to be someone to provide it because there's money in it. And if it's against the law, there's even more money in it because there's a premium placed on the danger, on the effort. The energy goes up to supply cocaine because it's illegal. And when the energy goes up, the cost goes up because more energy is required to get it done. So there's enough energy required, there's enough cost, there's enough profit in the cocaine industry that you'll find individuals who will provide cocaine for a price. That becomes a big industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry, and multi-billion-dollar industries can, that's a big deal. And when you're have an industry that's assaulted by another industry that is illegal, then in normal industry, you're under assault competitively in the marketplace, but you're restricted as to what you can do against your competitor. When you're in illegal activity, there are no restrictions because you're doing what's illegal, so you might as well kill the other guy because what you're doing is illegal anyway. So all of this violence that's being depicted, all of this stuff with the DEA and all of these murders going on in Mexico and the United States throughout the world, all of this corruption of government and judges and policemen and sheriffs and all of that financed through drug money, all of the crime associated with not just the crime of taking drugs, but of theft, of car theft, of home invasion, of all this other stuff that puts your life and my life in danger from people wanting to get money for their drug habit, to pay for their drug habit. All of that is contrived arbitrarily. There's no law of God that says cocaine should not be taken. There's no law of nature that says cocaine should not be taken. That's a law of man, and it's all contrived. And entire industries are built on both sides of the issue. The enforcement side, again, working with the law enforcement, which is then in danger. All the problems associated with that, corruption, payoff, briberies, murder. The other side, same thing. The danger presented to the community, home invasions. Look at Mexico, where, you get killed in a crossfire. One cartel beating up another cartel, killing each other. Bribing officials, bribing judges, bribing police. It's all made up by the government. What happens if tomorrow drugs are legalized? Cocaine is legalized. All of this disappears. That's the problem for the government. The DEA disappears. $50 billion DEA industry gone. The power of the government to tap your phones and invade your homes and tell you what you can and cannot do, gone. The power to the cartels and the money paid to police and judges and officials, gone. Who pays the price? You and I do. We don't take cocaine. We're not criminals. We pay the price. We're the ones paying the price. The government and the cartels play off each other because they both are enriched. They both are enriched by the process. We pay the price. Legalize drugs tomorrow, no more novellas. They have to go back to the old novellas with cowboys and Indians. I can't believe it. Legalize drugs. You've reduced crime by 80%. You eliminate all the mayhem going on in Mexico in overnight. Overnight. All these people being murdered. All this crime disappears overnight. You want to take drugs? Take drugs. I don't care. But what I do care is when my life and my children's lives and my wife's life are endangered through these crazy cartels. Okay? All right, we got one phone call to go here. Jerry from San Benito, 710 KRV. Yeah, what's up?
Dr. Gelman, I agree with you 150%.
All right, good enough.
Well, the thing about it is, like I always tell folks, look, if making it illegal with keep people from doing it. Why are all these people doing them right now? People that are going to do drugs are going to do them whether they're legal or illegal. Make it illegal. I mean, it just put these criminals out of business, you know?
Exactly right. I mean, we do all kinds of stuff which is not good for you. We smoke cigarettes, take alcohol, drive too fast, jump out of airplanes, okay? And the government decides what's legal and what's not legal, but people want cocaine? Shoot, give it to them. They want it, let them have it. What do I care? You know, so right now, if they're out there drinking alcohol, that's legal, and they let them get away with that, and that's perfectly legal. It used to be illegal, and it created a big crime industry. Well, you know why they won't legalize drugs? Because when they legalized alcohol, it removed all the profit for government and all these other types. And the government knows that. That's why they won't legalize drugs. It's not a question of morality. It's a question of avarice. Government power. Government is bad. That's all there is to it. Anyone who thinks otherwise, well, consider yourself successfully brainwashed. 7th and Caribbean Talkback with Lawrence Gelman. That's it for today. And I guess we'll be back next week. 7th and Caribbean Talkback with Lawrence Gelman. Thanks for listening.